Welcome to Doc NYC Spring Showcase. We're here with an awesome conversation from our team, from Showtime's Boys in Blue, EP Director Pete Berg, producer Mandon Lovett, and of course, Coach OA Charles Adams and Coach Ricky Plunkett. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Great.
Oh, doing well.
I mean, I'm going to just jump right into it. It definitely was an interesting time considering the time and space of the beginning of telling this story. I know that you coaches have been living it for a while, but can Pete and Mandon, can you take me back to the beginning of how you guys got on this journey to tell the story? And then how did you broach these relationships with our coaches here and get things rolling?
I think the origin of this show, I believe, came when I had heard about the Floyd killing, and I had gone to college in St. Paul, Minnesota, back in the late '80s. And when I heard about the Floyd killing, I was horrified, as was everyone. And I think there was a particular extra level to my horror, having spent so much time in the Twin Cities. And when I was there, St. Paul and Minneapolis, I was mainly in St. Paul, but they're right next to each other, was really, one of the more peaceful places that I'd ever been. And I wasn't aware of the kinds of situations like the George Floyd killing when I was there. And I kind of was very confused and wanted to make some kind of a creative response to what seemed to be happening in Minneapolis. In addition, I had several friends in New York and Los Angeles who were in law enforcement, and they were extremely frustrated at sort of an anti-cop movement that was taking on quite a bit of momentum. And I was talking to them about it. So the combination of the Floyd killing happening in the Twin Cities and the fact that I had a very good relationship with many police officers kind of pushed me into wanting to do something. And then I read, I believe it was a New York Times article about the Minneapolis North program, about Officer Adams, about Officer Plunkett. And I kind of thought that would be an area that would be worth my putting creative attention into. And then we put together a team really led by Mandon, went out there, started meeting folks like OA and Rick and some of the players and some of their families. And we all sort of agreed to go forward and try and capture a season of the next season of Minneapolis North, film it, and sort of see if we could take a look at what was going on in what I thought might be a really special program.
Yeah, Pete's team reached out to me and feeling like it was a good fit. And I read read his treatment and his deck about the coaches and the team. And it felt very interesting, but I wanted to go there myself before I committed to it and just meet everyone involved. And so I did. I spent about 4 or 5 days out in Minneapolis the summer leading into last season, and just sitting on couches with the coaches and the players and just hearing their stories, and really just listening. And then also from my end, just letting them know that there was no agenda here, and our agenda was only to listen and tell the truth and capture life as it is in Minneapolis. And so I think just hearing stories, listening, and then expressing my intentions to again be unbiased and agendaless, and then we just dove right into it in that season.
Just to take it back to you guys as coaches, these guys come and say, hey, we want to follow you. It's excitement. Is it like, a little apprehensive? I mean, I know Coach OA, you already have a big profile in the New York Times, but like.
It's definitely not about me. And as you guys can see from the show, that it's about all of us. I had my thoughts, wondering if it would be good or bad for our program, but, initially it all came down to it wasn't about me. It was, how does this portray, so how does it, or how will it help our kids, And I think that was once I realized that this is a platform that can definitely help our kids. That's when I knew that this was something that I was, just definitely fortunate to be a part of.
Yeah, for me, I was very apprehensive because I'm a private person. I don't like people following me around. Plus, I already have a target on my back of being a Minneapolis police officer. So I basically told Mandon, I don't need to be mic'd up. You can follow the kids, I follow whoever you need to be following, but I didn't want to do it at all. But after we talked and he told me what it was going to be like, and I was like, okay, perfect. It's going to be about them. It's going to be about the kids. So I was all in. So
I want to move on from this in a second, but I do have a question about that. It's you guys, but it's also the kids. So you present that to them. I'm sure, did they feel like they're going to be famous, or what? How did those combos go?
Well, a lot of the kids that I spoke with, they were a little apprehensive as well. So, but as they got used to the cameras being around. They got used to the crew being around. So it was just normal for them. It was just they didn't do anything spectacular per se, to make themselves shine. They were natural. They were being themselves. And that's the beauty of it. They didn't have to do anything special. They were, being who they were. So. And that's what made the show, what it was, because they were who they were,
Pete, you mentioned something, at the beginning about the impetus of this whole thing and this conversation that was happening. How important for all of you, was it to see the debate around this issue to be shown on screen? Because I think that's really one of the core things across all the episodes, is that it's not just a follow. You have the school, you have the team, you have the community, you have the politicians, and everyone has their thoughts and perspectives on it. You have the barbershop, some awesome scenes in there. How did you go into and approaching that? And how did you build that out? And did you find that as you went along?
Are you asking how we built out the vote to defund the police? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking, yes. So how did you decide to include all these various aspects of this discussion in the zeitgeist? Right. And then also, you bring that up, and how did you decide to include that particular thread in that as a story point?
Our approach was somewhat of a cinema verite approach, meaning we weren't going to go down there, like Mandon just said, with an agenda. We want to show how bad cops have it down there. We want to show how bad cops are. We want to show the complexities of raising families in this type of an environment. We want to show guys like Jeremiah trying to initiate a vote to defund. We didn't have that plan. We just simply went down there with our eyes wide open, asked OA and Plunkett and the others if we could just see what's happening. And very quickly, those were the things that were happening. That vote was going down. Jeremiah was in the middle of, a very active campaign to try and defund that police department. And we just happened to be there. So that became an obvious area that we would want to function, or we would want to focus on. But one of the many, I think, extraordinary discoveries that we had going down there was simply that our hunch was right, that this was a group of men, coach cops, and players who were in the middle of a very complicated time, a very stressful time. All the pressures of the Floyd killing, the upcoming trial of Derek Chauvin, the movement to defund the police department, these were all real stressors. And in the middle of it, they had to try and win a football season. And, winning football games is very stressful with none of these distractions. So we suspected that if we got permission to go down there, we would be going down there at a very dynamic time for many different reasons. And there would be many things to look at, such as the defund movement. And it turned out that there were others. So, I think part of success in making a film like this is making sure that there's a lot of conflict and there's a lot of pressure on your subjects. And these guys were going through one hell of a lot of conflict and pressure.
Absolutely. Yeah, so much of documentary filmmaking is just about timing and capturing there are all these different forces that play in all communities, and in particular North Minneapolis. You have football, you have community, this tension of policing and violence. And so we, like Pete said, when we went down there, we actually had no idea that this vote was taking place. But as fall started to unravel, I started as a producer just seeing signs, campaign signs popping up around the neighborhoods. And then I started asking some questions. And then, what is this vote, this question too, that I keep seeing in all these signs on people's lawns? What is that about? And that's when wow, this is about defunding the police. Wow, these are the guys, these are our coaches. These are this issue, this vote affects our cast. And so you have to be true to that. And that's something that we need to capture. And so again, we just dove right in. And then, Rick's a barber. This is what he does. This is his side gig. And so, it's a great atmosphere to capture, the Black barbershop. And at the Black barbershop, these are the conversations, these are the natural conversations that take place in that environment. And so we cut the cameras on and we just rolled. And these are the moments and these are the emotions that are captured along with that.
You guys talk about the barbershop experience a bit. You've got the verite situation where you're just following, and then you're like, oh, well, okay, let's go to the shop. I know, Rich, you're a private person. You thought it was going to be about coach, cop, Rich, like all these other words. Now you're in the barbershop.
Well, what happened was I told Mandon that, like I said, I said, you don't have to follow me, I'm good. And he was like, well, we want to follow you or whatever. I said, well, if you want to follow me, you catch me in my natural habitat. And there was two places, and one was the gym and one was the barbershop. And I told him, I said, pull up and you'll see what happens, and you'll see, what the atmosphere, what it is. And then on top of it, I had to, it worked out because I had to cut OA's hair. And so it just blended, it just worked. And you got what you got, and, you got the rawness, you got the real Rick, the real OA, you got the real barbershop. And this is some of the debates that go on in the barbershop. Not only, policing, but basketball, football, whatever, what I'm saying? Those things happen in the barbershop. What I always say is two things I will not talk about is politics and religion, because it's just a whole other, atmosphere. But that right there was the thing. And, it was raw and it was real, and, got heated, and and that's what I assumed it would do. So
I mean, you talked about the intimacy of that space, the barber space, and like those conversations that are happening. I mean, I want to throw it back to Mandon and Pete on this. You also have all of the families. So you had to create sort of these intimate spaces again, talking about these issues, your verite fly on the wall. They're talking about these things. I found those moments really strong. Can you guys just talk about how these things came about and what it was like being in those rooms with the aunts and the grandmas and the moms and the dads and the little sisters and all that?
Yeah, again, it went back to our initial conversations in the summer and just expressing our intentions. And then for me as a filmmaker, is just telling folks that, just ignore the cameras, just be yourself. And then I tried to find moments when it made sense to maybe just throw a question out there or throw a thought out there and see how folks will respond to just a general thought and something that's relevant to the community. So whether it be football, like what's going on with the game next week, like how you guys feeling about next week's game, or like this vote's coming up, it's 2 weeks away, how are you guys feeling about that, in the space of like say a barbecue or a breakfast, And so it's there's this mix of, you know, capturing organic moments, but you know, you got cameras, you got a full crew right there. But at the end of the day, trying to create that intimacy. And I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to trust. And so that's what you fight for as a filmmaker, is to just have people believe in you and to trust you. And I was so fortunate to hopefully to gain that trust.
So, I mean, anyone that's watched this all the way through knows that it, I mean, has a very tragic end. I mean, one of the most powerful scenes in this is UOA talking about what does it mean to actually, like, as a coach, when you tell people, you know, you're going to take their kids in and protect their kids and all these things, and you don't know if you really can do that with, you know, the tragedy of D Hill. And how do you guys keep going and doing this work, having things like that weigh on your shoulders and knowing the pressure? And, you know, for our filmmaking team, as a follow-up, how did you come together and decide where you're going to take this film and how you're going to, well, film series and finish it after the tragedy?
Well, I mean, one thing that, you know, after D Hill died, I flew out to Minneapolis, and we had a crew who'd been there, you know, with Mandon, and there were probably 20 folks or so. And they were all in a back dining room at a restaurant, and they were just traumatized. They were lost. They didn't know what to do. And someone asked me, what do we do? What does this mean? And, you know, we had said we were going to come out there and shoot for X amount of months, and we were winding up. But when D Hill was killed, we were still out there shooting. And so it was still, you know, part of the time frame that constituted the job, so to speak. It was within that time frame. And I said, you know, we can't understand processing the death of a, you know, 15-year-old boy is something that's almost, at least to me, impossible to process and make sense of. And so we can't make sense of it now. Let's finish the film. Let's stay close to the community, and, you know, make sure that they want us to finish the film, meaning talk to, you know, D Hill's parents and the coaches. And we were, you know, given permission to finish filming, which we did. And that included the funeral, and the memorial service, balloon releasing ceremony afterwards, and then just some conversations with, you know, Rick and OA and some of the other folks. And then we just took it back into the edit room and tried to put it together in a way that made sense to us. You know, I don't think any of us had ever experienced anything quite like this, ever. And then it became very important to us to show it to the community prior to certainly showing it, you know, putting it out and making sure that the folks that mattered, some of whom are on this call right now, felt as though we were doing it right. We were doing it in a way that you know, took a very, very complicated, painful experience and tied it up in a way that people could watch and feel maybe they were seeing the very best of D Hill, maybe that he'd been memorialized in a way that felt right. And we were determined that if the family had said, no, this isn't what we want, this doesn't feel good, we would make the changes. But we were, you know, it was, you get into something like that and you're flying blind. There is no rule book for how to move forward. So we tried to do that as best as we could, and then showed it to OA and Rick and the Hill family, and, you know, their support guided us as filmmakers.
For me, it was certainly one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with and process as both a filmmaker and as a man. And I was not equipped at all to deal with this emotionally and as from a work standpoint. And I leaned on Pete a lot, calling him, and I know being in Minneapolis and calling him and just being like, man, what do I do? What do I say? And Pete has a tremendous amount of experience dealing with his films dealing with victims of wars and different various tragedies. And so he's telling me that you got to walk into the fire and just take it one moment at a time. And again, it's just leaning on the authenticity and the intention of this film and this project, and knowing that there's got to be something. There's got to be something that we can positively draw from this experience, and sharing the beautiful moments of D Hill's life and his family. It just makes this story that much realer, and it was the hardest thing again that I've ever done, but it was something that I feel it had to be done. We had to tell this story, and there was an urgency that D Hill's death brought to this story, and so there's nothing to prepare you for it, but it's something that had to be done.
I've it hit me kind of hard. I grew up in Chicago, so I've seen, gunfights. I've seen, a lot of, gangbangers shooting each other, or whatever the case may be. I've been in a barbershop. I had to hold somebody's hand who got shot in the head. Had to hold their head together so the brains wouldn't seek out. So, I've seen that, and I was numb to it. As a police officer, I got numb to, seeing a lot of deaths. I've seen, I had to go to DOA calls, dead on arrival calls or what have you. But, like you said, like I always said, receiving that call, I'm like, nah, I don't believe it, because I had just talked to him the day before and I had the day off. And then my thought process was, if I was patrolling that area, that would have never happened. That was my thought process. I can't save everybody, of course, but that's my area that I patrol at the time. And it hit me because I had the day off and I was out running errands or whatnot. And so I was on my way to the north side and receiving that call that was like, nah, nah. And then I got a call from his parents, like, you need to get to the hospital to make sure it's true. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so when I get there, it's like, it's reality hitting. And like I said, I'm numb to the deaths, but this is a little harder for me because I was close to him. I was real close to him outside of football. Like I said, I had a personal relationship outside of football. I talked to him, on a daily about, football things, life things, or whatever. So when a part of me was taken, seemed like a part of me was taken when it happened. And I didn't have no answers. Police, the crew kept it away from me. They kept me off of the call. They didn't want me to participate in, in the findings or whatever. So it was all hitting me pretty hard. And like I always said, but at the time, you're not thinking like that. You're not thinking, whatever. But we had to move on. We had to do what we need to do for him. We had to, think about the kids as well. We had to, get them together and make sure that they were okay, because they were his friends too. That was his boys. They were close. So we had to make sure that they were okay. Not just our personal life, but also that we're mentoring these kids. We have to stand strong for these kids, and we have to show them that, we're here for them as well. Not just for this tragedy, but for your tragedy, for your mental capacity as well. Because a lot of kids were messed up, around it. So we had to make sure that we can get them back on track and basically do it for him. That was the cry, do it for D Hill, finish for him. And we had to make sure that was, as a coaching staff, we had to bottle our things in and make sure that these kids grow up to be young men in spite of the tragedy, because sometimes this happens. You don't want it to, but it does. So we had to move on, and this film captured it. You guys captured those moments in time. Those moments where his life and the kid's life as well. So,
and just on top of that too, I would say that this like the like us as coaches, like taking the blame and figuring, like feeling that we could have done more. That was really the pit inside my stomach because, it all comes to, and we talked about this, probably not as much on camera, but like the whole SRO situation. And, even though it's not fair, but, I felt that this would have been prevented if I was still an SRO. Just like Rick said that, if he was working that day, and the reason why I say that, and I say it out loud, is because I know. I mean, it's not about trying to take away kids' rights or trying to limit them for things, but just having common sense. And I knew, and I know that if I was still in the school as the SRO, that when kids were deciding to leave, for whatever it would be, if there was a kid that I knew was a part of that football program, there was no way I would have let that kid leave. The kid could have been pissed off at me. I would have been like, you know what, if you're going anywhere, you better have your mom call me right now. Or if you guys want to go out of classroom and go to the weight room. I just know that because in the back of my head, I know that we are responsible for them when they're here in this building. And if they leave, something could happen to them. So I always beat myself up over that, which it may not be fair, but in the same sense, I know, and the fears that we had of not having SROs, it became reality. And, that's one thing that's kind of hard to deal with for me all the time.
And to piggyback on what he's saying, I know for a fact that those kids wouldn't have went anywhere. Those kids, basically 75% of the kids at that school probably wouldn't have walked out if Oway was there because he would have gathered them there. You know what I mean? I've seen it. When I've been working and he was there, I would go to the school and those kids, it's a respect factor there. So know for a fact that if he was there, it wouldn't have happened at all. You know what I mean? Like you said, saying that he's not taking the rights from him, but it's a conscious thing that he would threw at him. Let's do something different. You want to protest? Let's protest here. Let's talk about it here in the weight room. Let's talk about it here in the gym. Let's have a conversation before we go out and do something on a spontaneous thing. And again, it is what it is. But I know for a fact if we wouldn't have jumped to the conclusion of getting rid of police in the school, these things wouldn't happen, because now that these things, the police are not in the school, a lot more things are happening inside of the schools in the inner city. So, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to go on that spiel. So,
Brandon,
Hill was also.
Are you aware, Brandon, what OA is speaking to specifically? The issue of the SRO.
Are you asking me?
Yes. Do you
I couldn't hear.
understand?
Sorry.
You
Yes,
understand?
and having the vote to remove him from his position, and that
Okay.
I understand.
D Hill was he was a shining example of everything that a 15-year-old should be. He was the starting quarterback for the team, honor roll student. He was a brother to two sisters. He was a son to his mother and father. And there are so many stereotypes that are often associated with young Black men dying in this country. Was he a these questions that are thrown out and these stereotypes? What was he doing? Who was he into it with? Was he a thug? Was he a gang member? All these things. And so, if I had any agenda at all at that moment, it was to disrupt those narratives. And so I'm so eternally thankful to capture who D Hill really was and really place it in this, what is essentially is a historical document that will live on forever. And his legacy was captured for all to see. And so there'll be no mistaking who D Hill was. And so that's something, there's any sort of positive that I can draw from that's one. And so yeah, just leaning on that and that's helped me get through this.
And to speak on that, just to piggyback, I mean, if you knew D Hill, if you was going to hang around him, whatever you were doing in the streets or whatever, smoking or whatever, he wasn't going to allow you to hang around him. And that's the specialty that he had. He's a special kid. You know what I mean? People followed him before who he was. So if you were, and he would tell you, you can't be with me if you're doing this or doing that, because I'm not on that. And some of those kids, you know, turn from that just to be in his space. You know what I mean? Because that's who he was. He didn't judge you or anything like that, but he just let you know this is what I stand for. And if you're going to be in my space, then you have to be this. And like I said, most of those kids did that. And that's just, I mean, that's just truly how he was, who he is. And so, you know.
So it's an incredibly powerful story. And I'm like very grateful for you all for sharing with us, not only your story broadly, but like your intimacy and openness here on Spring Showcase. So I want to thank you all for joining us and sharing Boys in Blue with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
No doubt. Absolutely.
Thank you.